When I was 6 years old, I told my mother there was something living under my bed. She did what every parent does. She got down on her knees, lifted the bed skirt, and showed me the empty space underneath. "See," she said. "Nothing there." I nodded, because that's what you do when you're 6 and your mother tells you something with that much confidence. But I didn't believe her. Not really, because I had heard it breathing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even scary at first, not in the way you'd expect. It was just a low, steady sound, like someone breathing through a stuffy nose, slow and patient, always in rhythm with my own breathing but never quite matching it. Sometimes it would pause when I moved, like it was listening to see if I'd noticed. I stopped telling my parents after that first time. I learned quickly that adults have a way of making you feel foolish for believing your own senses. So instead, I adapted. I stopped letting my feet hang off the bed. I stopped looking underneath before I turned off the light, because some childish logic told me that if I didn't look, it couldn't look back. And for years that was enough. The breathing continued most nights, but it never became anything more than that. A presence. A tenant I never agreed to have. There was one more thing I remembered from those years, something I hadn't thought about in decades until all of this started again. When I was about 8, my cousin stayed over for a week while his parents sorted out some family emergency. He slept on a mattress on my floor, right beside my bed. On the third night, he woke everyone up screaming. My aunt came running in, flipped on the lights, and found him pressed against the wall, as far from my bed as the room would allow. He wouldn't say what happened, not that night, not the next morning. It wasn't until years later, when we were teenagers and both a little drunk at a family barbecue, that he finally told me. He said something had grabbed his ankle from under my bed and pulled hard enough that his whole body slid a few inches across the carpet. I asked him if he was sure it wasn't me, some kind of prank. He looked at me the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether they'll believe you. Then he said, "I felt fingers. Too many of them." I laughed it off then. I laugh it off less now. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a child anymore. I am 34 years old. I have a mortgage, a job in logistics, a wife who thinks I snort too loudly, and exactly zero patience for ghost stories. I stopped believing in monsters under the bed the way most people do, gradually, without ever really deciding to. Childhood fears just get buried under adult ones. Until 3 weeks ago. My mother passed away in April. Cancer, quick at the end, though nothing about watching someone you love disappear ever feels quick. After the funeral, my siblings and I had to clean out the house we grew up in, the same house with the same bedroom, still holding the same bed frame my parents never bothered replacing because, as my mother used to joke, it's outlived 3 mattresses and it'll outlive me too. She wasn't wrong. I volunteered to sort through my old room, partly out of nostalgia, partly because I didn't want my sister asking why I still had every awkward preteen notebook stuffed in a closet. It was late, past 11, and I was alone in the house for the first time since I was a teenager. I remember kneeling down to grab a box shoved under the bed, the same frame, and my hand brushed against something that was not cardboard. It was cold. And it moved. I yanked my hand back so fast I hit my head on the bed frame above me. I sat there on the floor of my childhood bedroom, 34 years old, heart slamming against my ribs, telling myself it was a mouse. An old house like that, it made sense. Mice get in. That's what I told myself out loud in an empty house at 11 at night because saying it out loud somehow made it more true. I didn't look under the bed again that night. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning, in daylight, like a reasonable adult. But before I left the room, right as my hand was on the light switch, I heard it. The breathing. Slow. Patient. In rhythm with mine but never quite matching it. Exactly the way I remembered it from when I was 6 years old, lying awake, too afraid to let my feet hang off the mattress. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car in the driveway until sunrise, telling myself every rational explanation available to me. Old houses settle. Pipes creak. Rodents nest in insulation and make sounds that trick the mind into hearing breath where there is none. I've repeated these explanations to myself so many times over the past 3 weeks that I can recite them without thinking, the way you recite a prayer you no longer believe in but say anyway because stopping feels dangerous. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, still sitting in that driveway, I did something I'm not proud of. I searched my mother's name along with the words under the bed and noises, half expecting nothing, half hoping for something that would explain all of this away as some story she used to tell people. What I found instead was an old email thread from almost 20 years ago, my mother writing to my aunt, the same aunt whose son had slept on my floor that night. The subject line just said, "About the room." In it, my mother mentioned, almost in passing, that she'd once found deep gouges in the underside of the bed frame, the kind you'd expect from claws dragged slowly across wood, and that she'd sanded them down herself so none of us kids would ask questions. She ended the email with a single line, "I think it's better if we just don't talk about it. Kids forget things if we let them." They never sanded it down completely. I found out the next morning. The next morning, I forced myself back into that room. I got on my hands and knees, phone flashlight in hand, and I looked under that bed for the first time since I was 6 years old. There was nothing there. Just dust, a single old sock, and the wood slats of a bed frame that has outlived 3 mattresses, 1 marriage, and now the woman who slept in it. I laughed, actually laughed, standing there in that dusty room, feeling like an idiot for the fear that had kept me awake all night. I finished sorting the room that day. I threw out the boxes, donated the furniture, and helped my siblings prepare the house for sale. That should have been the end of it. A grown man scaring himself in an empty childhood home, nothing more than grief manifesting in strange ways. That's what my wife said when I told her, and honestly, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Except 2 nights ago, I woke up in my own house, my own bed, the one I've slept in for 6 years, to the sound of breathing beneath me. Slow. Patient. In rhythm with mine but never quite matching it. I lay perfectly still, the way I used to when I was 6, telling myself if I didn't move, if I didn't look, it couldn't look back. My wife stirred beside me, half asleep, and mumbled something I didn't quite catch. I asked her as calmly as I could manage to turn on the lamp. She did. Nothing under the bed but our storage bins and a stray shoe. She laughed sleepily and rolled back over, asleep again within a minute. I lay awake until morning. The next day, while she was at work, I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I got down on the floor, phone flashlight in hand, and I checked the underside of our bed frame. It's a different bed, a different house, a different life, one I built specifically far away from that childhood room. But there, carved faintly into the wood, so faint I might have convinced myself it was nothing if I hadn't already seen its twin on my mother's old bed frame just weeks before, were the same thin, parallel grooves. Claw marks, or something shaped enough like them that the distinction stopped mattering to me. I haven't asked my wife if she's heard anything. I'm not sure I want the answer. Some nights I tell myself it followed the sound of my breathing, the way it always seemed to know my rhythm, patient enough to wait 28 years for me to forget, patient enough to wait for my mother to die and the old house to sell and a new bed to be bought in a new city, just to prove that it was never about the room at all. It was about me. I haven't let my feet hang off the mattress since.